Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 3 of the 2020 Pathways to Law Conference. Thank you for joining us. My name is Pamela Chung, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Community Services Committee of the Asian American Bar Association of the Greater Bay Area. The purpose of this conference is to provide you with advice and insights from Asian American and Pacific Islander attorneys and law students. Today, we have the Alternative Careers panel, which features attorneys who have used their law degree and legal training to pursue careers outside of the traditional practice of law. I'm excited to introduce you to our moderator, Sean Tamura. Sean is a partner at the law firm of Minami Tamaki in San Francisco. Sean's practice focuses on employment, consumer, and class action law. He has been a member of the board of directors of the Asian American Bar Association since 2017. And now, without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Sean.
Thank you, Pamela. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. We have a great panel on alternative legal careers for you this morning, where we'll be talking about career opportunities post-law school that you may not have heard as much about. Our goal today is really to show you some of the many things that you can do with your law degree and how you can really set your own career path after attending law school. We encourage you to send in questions in the chat box during this panel. We'll try to get to as many of the questions as we can during this time that we have together. I'd like to get started by introducing our panelists. Kyong Kim is an attorney turned entrepreneur and the co-founder of Seasalt Kids, an eco-friendly kids swimwear line. Seasalt Kids makes its swimsuits from recycled fabrics regenerated from post-consumer plastic bottles and fishing nets. Elica Vafaie is a pro bono director at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights of the San Francisco Bay Area, a civil rights organization focusing on immigrant justice, criminal justice, and economic justice. She joined the Lawyers Committee from Advancing Justice Asian Law Caucus, where she was a staff attorney and program manager of the National Security and Civil Rights Program. Her work focused on legal services, litigation, policy advocacy, and know your rights education, protecting the civil rights of Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, and South Asian communities, with a particular emphasis on the Muslim ban. Elica is a chapter president emeritus on the board of the Iranian American Bar Association, Northern California chapter. Elica formerly worked as a supervising attorney to establish the University of California Immigrant Legal Services Center, providing free immigration legal services clinics and know your rights training to UC students and their families across California. Elica received her BA from UC Irvine and her JD from UC Davis School of Law. Allison Wang is a visiting professor of law and the director of externship programs at Golden Gate University School of Law. In her role as director, she connects students with opportunities to earn credit and sometimes pay while participating in practical training opportunities off campus with practicing lawyers and judges. This spring, Professor Wang created Golden Gate University's first immigration clinic, in which students worked with clients seeking asylum and U visa relief. She also teaches legal writing and research to first-year law students and teaches clinical skills to 2L and 3L students in the Civil Field Placement Seminar. Prior to joining Golden Gate University as a full-time faculty member, she worked in private practice, clerked for a magistrate judge in the Northern District of California, and worked as a research and criminal staff attorney at the San Francisco Superior Court. So now that you know about what our panelists do, I wanted to ask each of them a bit more about their career paths. Professor Wang, can you start us off by telling us about your transition from law firm attorney to teaching full-time?
Yes, I found myself in my practice developing systems and looking at the work that I was doing, organizing it, and speaking to other attorneys about why I was doing the things that I was doing. And I realized that I was interested in sharing some of my skills and my knowledge with other people, attorneys, potentially law students. And so I started exploring the possibility of being able to teach. A colleague of mine mentioned that one of the local law schools was looking for a research and writing professor. And so I decided to submit an application. And I was a little bit nervous about it, thinking about transitioning to teaching, but I decided to give it a try, and I agreed to teach one research and writing course. And from possibly the moment that I started teaching, I realized that I loved it and that this was something that I wanted to do. And so I began exploring the possible ways that I could transition into teaching full-time. I started teaching more and more classes at the university and looking for opportunities to join the faculty. And when I saw that there was a clinical job, the director of externships position open, I applied for it, and I haven't looked back. I really enjoy teaching as opposed to practicing.
And can you tell us a little bit for background about what your practice was when you were practicing full time?
Yes. When I practiced, I did primarily landlord-tenant work. I also did probate litigation, real estate law. So a wide variety of practice within real estate landlord-tenant field.
Elica, can you tell us about how you took your path from law school to your role currently with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, and great to be with you all. So for me, actually, pursuing an alternative career path is grounded in my work before becoming a lawyer. I took time off in between undergrad and law school and worked at a civil rights nonprofit and got exposed to a lot of different cases. And I always remember one particular immigration case. It involved a husband and a wife who were separated in 2 different countries. And there was a court hearing that they had to go through. And the whole experience and what they went through and the trauma was so significant that the wife in the couple, who was pregnant at the time, actually miscarried from the stress. And even though they won their case, that case really grounded for me the fact that I've never felt that being in law or being in court is the ultimate justice, right? It's incredibly important, it's critical, but what are all the different ways and all the different strategies that we can advance civil rights and social justice? So I had that grounding going into law school, and since then have really focused on the issues that I'm passionate about, the civil rights issues that mean most to me. And my career trajectory has involved, since law school, working at a legal aid on direct legal services and learning how to work with clients, working at a foundation where I gave grants to nonprofits, and the foundation hired lawyers to help them figure out what kind of cases to fund, what kind of policy change to fund. I helped set up a legal services for DACA students and learned about community lawyering and how to build out a program. And at the Asian Law Caucus, you know, just spending a lot of time at the airports, seeing the thousands of volunteers that came, seeing how many private sector attorneys made such a significant difference in the civil rights work, led me to the Lawyers Committee right now, which is where I'm currently the pro bono director. And I have the honor to work with an incredible staff and help bring and marshal private pro bono resources and volunteers to effectuate social change.
And Kyong, I know that you recently started your business or launched your business. Can you tell us a little more about going from a law firm attorney to starting this business recently?
Sure. Thanks again for having me, and thanks for all the viewers for tuning in on a Saturday morning. So I had been a practicing attorney for about 10 years. I started off in insurance defense, litigating cases, trying cases. And then I went into big law, where I still practiced commercial defense, civil litigation, as well as trust and estates litigation. The ultimate reason for me leaving private practice and starting the business was, you know, just to be quite honest, I was extremely burnt out. I was burning the candle at both ends for many years, just really working myself to a point where everything became very mundane. There was I never I started to lose interest and the joy that I once had when I was a practicing attorney. So I took a leave of absence, and during that time, my older sister, with whom I launched Seasalt Kids, it was her dream to actually launch an eco-friendly kids swimsuit company. So I joined forces with her, and we ended up launching Seasalt Kids. It went officially live in December of 2019, which is the best time to launch a kids swimsuit company, right before winter and right before the COVID crisis. And the reason why I ended up making that leap, I think it was, just life giving me this opportunity to be able to take a step away from private practice and all the rigors that come with that, and to evaluate my life and what I wanted to do on a personal level and also a professional level. And at the same time, my older sister really wanted to launch her swimsuit company and had done so much research into, product development and the ins and outs of the manufacturing process. So it was just such a convenient time for us to kind of join forces and finally launch this business.
And Kyong, so you said that this business was started off as your sister's dream, her idea. And so how does her role in the company compare to yours? And sort of what is your function, your role in the company? I know it must be a lot for both of you.
Yeah.
Starting this company now.
It's definitely a lot. I think had I known all of the things that go into launching a business, especially a product business, and we manufacture in California, which is extremely difficult, just in terms of sourcing and ensuring that our supply chain is sustainable and ethical, ensuring that our factories are up to our standards as well. My sister takes more of the creative role. She is the creative brains behind Seasalt Kids, and I take more of the legal role. So she likes to refer to me as Mrs. No, because I'm constantly saying we can't do things. As an attorney, you're risk adverse, so you're very conscientious of the business decisions that you make and the potential liabilities that might occur. I'm learning to balance that more now, to take more risk as an entrepreneur versus my legal side coming in and always wanting to say, no, there's too much risk involved. But I basically take care of all of the legal. With Seasalt Kids, I did all the business formation, developed the infrastructure, do all of the legal pages that you have to do when you do have an e-commerce site, ensure that our privacy is up to par, especially with the new laws that came out as of this year. And just, do anything that involves legal or any potential liability or risk. I do help out with the day-to-day operations. I'm more of the operations and, the person that actually manages the back end of the business.
So I think that, a lot of folks who are considering law school, who we have in our audience this morning, have a certain idea of what life is like after you get that JD and you start practicing. I'm wondering for our panelists, what drew you folks to law school initially, and did you know what you wanted to do with your law degree when you started law school?
Well, I'll jump in. I think I think the reason why I became a lawyer was based on my family history. My parents were immigrants from Korea. I was actually born in South Korea, and we immigrated to the United States when I was just about a year old. My parents didn't have a college education. So for them, education was, the end all be all. And they really kind of enforced that value on us. Typically for immigrants or immigrant families, the options are you want to be a doctor or you want to be a lawyer, right? And I knew science was not my thing. I was not very good at chemistry, nor was I good at math, and I'm still not very good at math. So I knew I would be an attorney. The way I was raised to think that it was such a prestigious, position, not only in society, but a very stable profession. And throughout high school and college, I just knew I would go to law school. It was just a matter of time. Always grappling with, I always had an affinity towards fashion. So I always grappled with that. I was at one point going to go to NYU to pursue a design career there, but then decided to go to UC Berkeley. And from there, just kind of, the course that, I took was just basically getting to law school. But I did take 3 years off before going to law school to dabble in the other things that I thought I wanted to do, like advertising or marketing, which I find very valuable. I think if anybody has a question about law school, take some time now, have a year, 2 years, 3 years before you go to law school and before you commit, because it is a very, very, very strong commitment. So if there's anything else that you think you want to do or that piques your interest, try that route first, and then get that out of your system. And if you still want to go to law school and you want to be a lawyer, then you'll eventually get to that path.
I couldn't agree with that more. I took almost 10 years between college and going to law school. And I think that, that is a less traditional length of time to take between starting graduate school. But I am so thankful for the ability to explore other careers. I was working in nonprofit management, which I loved. And partially through that, I realized that I could do more if I went back to school and got my law degree. And that was what really finally gave me the impetus to go back. I had struggled with it for many years. And so I think that what you're saying is very true. Law school is a huge commitment. It's a huge financial commitment. It's a huge time commitment. I don't think that you can really understand the effect that it will have on you until you start your first year of law school. And so as a result, I do think that taking time to really be certain that this is the path that you want to be on before you apply is really important.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I also took time off in between to work. And for me, what drew me to law initially was, in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, seeing some of the domestic civil rights issues and what was happening with hate crimes and discrimination against Middle Eastern, Muslim, and South Asian communities, including my own community. And so took time in between undergraduate and law school to work at a civil rights nonprofit. And even though, as I shared earlier, I knew I would never be the litigator in court, I saw the value of having a law degree, the skill set that it gives you, the different access you have in many different ways, and completely echo that having that experience is so key, because law school, the 3 years actually go fast, And so being grounded in what is driving you to law school in the first place and having a good grasp of that really helps you navigate those 3 years, what courses to take, what you want to explore in a way that is incredibly important.
And Elica, you're currently a pro bono director with the lawyers community. Can you describe for us kind of what your day-to-day is like for those who might not be so familiar with pro bono work that law firms do?
Sure, absolutely. So, I work at a civil rights nonprofit, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights. And as the pro bono director, what that means is I have the privilege of working with hundreds of private attorneys at law firms outside of our civil rights nonprofit. And we partner together and we match, cases and counsel cases together and bring pro bono resources to amplify the work. So in my position, I don't have my own cases anymore, right? I used to have a huge docket of cases, but I no longer have my own cases. I support the amazing attorneys at Lawyers Committee doing immigrant rights, racial justice, and supporting small businesses to match with private firms and resources. And I really believe that no matter what law pathway you take, everyone has a role for civil rights. Everyone has a role in dismantling systems of oppression. And I'll give just a few examples of what, kind of the pro bono wins look like in my day-to-day work. So one example is after COVID-19 hit and small businesses were really, devastated, we had a 300% increase, the attorneys that give legal services to small businesses. So finding pro bono attorneys at other law firms to help meet that demand. Another example is finding and supporting the folks in the immigration program, find a big law firm to litigate a case to get medically vulnerable immigrant detainees released from detention centers. And getting other attorneys to support with research needs that we need and training needs that we need. So that just kind of gives you a flavor of the issues that I work on a day-to-day basis.
So all of you have worked as attorneys, either in private practice or providing direct legal services in the nonprofit sector. I'm wondering, for all of you who have made that transition in your career, was it hard letting go of that advocate role? Or do you look back on that and miss it? Or and I know you all, we've talked prior to this and find that you find the work that you do now very satisfying and gratifying. But can you describe any of the challenges you've had, if any, in letting go of that role as advocate?
I can start this one. I do think it is hard to let go a little bit, especially in the area of law where I was working, landlord-tenant. There are so many people who need your help, and to walk away from that and to not be able to provide help anymore is definitely something that tugs at you a little bit. I think that's the hardest part for me to walk away from, is that I'm no longer actively advocating and helping in that way. However, for me, transitioning to what I'm doing now, where I am working with students and helping them every day, has sort of softened that and is equally rewarding for me. But I definitely will see injustice, or I will hear about a case that my colleague is working on and want to be involved and want to be able to provide hands-on help.
I think for me, I do definitely miss the advocacy role as an attorney in private practice and representing clients or defending them. But I have pivoted that and kind of made that a part of my mission for Seasalt Kids. So one of our core values is really giving back to the community and partnering up with nonprofits and doing a lot of collaborations and promotions to either fundraise for them or help with donations. So like the Australian fires, for instance, we donated a portion of our sales to a group in Australia to help with the wildfire relief. So while I'm not necessarily in that advocacy role, I do find I'm still trying to carry on that legacy of mine and from the legal profession to a business and an entrepreneur and make that part of Seasalt Kids. One of the promotions that we're doing currently is there's a nonprofit group in San Diego, and they work with foster children. And they work with foster children, have all these programs that are surf related, water related, because of the therapeutic nature of water. So one of the recent promotions that we did was a buy one, give one towel donation. So we are now, actually this morning, I shipped off 100 eco-friendly towels that are made from post-consumer recycled materials to the organization to hand out to the foster kids who need towels. So the role is different, but the ultimate mission and the why is still there.
Yeah, I would say two things on this point in terms of do I miss working with on a direct service level. One, I would say that for me, the direct services are so key. A lot of times I was representing people from my own community and having the honor of being a community lawyer. And while that was wonderful, I paid attention to what was making me happy and my joy and sparking that interest for me. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that was doing trainings for other attorneys or building out more capacity for us to do civil rights work. So I could take one Muslim ban direct service case, or I could train 450 lawyers to do Muslim ban cases. And both are equally important, but I noticed the difference that I felt when I felt that I was helping build out more legal power for the civil rights issues that we're facing right now. And I listen to that, and I absolutely love what I'm doing right now and feel very honored to do that. So the second point I'll just make is, I think law and how we design our legal careers is so creative and wonderful. If you decide at some point to shift your career and not do direct services or do direct services, you can get involved in volunteer work. You can do things on the side that help you stay connected. I have some pro bono cases of my own in the Iranian American community that I take on that keeps me connected to the direct services. So I think it's important to think about what makes you happy and to have a good pulse check on what you need and what you want out of your career.
Great. I think one of the big questions that I wanted to make sure that we covered today, maybe because of my own self-interest as a practicing attorney, and I think the question that a lot of attorneys in private practice, the question that we have is, for folks who have transitioned to different legal careers, whether as a litigator or in transactional work, how have the legal skills that you developed in practice transferred over to the skills needed in your current position, or what are the skills that you needed to develop as you changed your career?
I will say that one of the things that is the most transferable to teaching is your ability as an attorney to take complex information and communicate to other people so that they can understand it and learn. And so I speak with a lot of attorneys who are in practice now who will ask me, what would it be like to teach? I don't think I could do that because I've never taught before. And I say, you have. You're teaching every day. Every time that you break down a complex case and talk to your client, you're teaching. Every time you go to court and you inform the judge about your case and you break it down into the elements that the judge needs to understand and you provide the law that the judge needs to analyze, you're teaching. And so I think that is one of the main things that I would say that you would take with you if you wanted to transition into teaching at the law school level, college level, or in any higher education.
I totally agree with that. I think having a legal background and the skill sets to quickly, effectively analyze complex situations, as Allison had mentioned, is transferable almost across all industries. And I say that because when we started Seasalt Kids, we obviously had to think about how to take this idea that my sister had come up with, turn that into a product, and then have that and take that product to market. There's so many steps that are involved, but setting that infrastructure, your business model, what type of business entity do you want to be? Where to look to get the resources and the answers that you need in terms of the legal ramifications. How does a certain business model affect liabilities, affect the amount of risk that you might be faced with, affect your tax consequences? I was a litigator, so and setting up the business and doing all the legal for it is somewhat of a transactional, more of a transactional role. But I found that being a litigator and being able to anticipate the potential risks and liability, especially for the business, has really helped me instrumentally in helping Seasalt and developing that infrastructure and the ultimate business model that we have today.
I would agree and build on those themes that I love how flexible and transferable legal skills and the law degree is, right? Not just because you learn about how to analyze, oral presentation, your written skills, all of that is totally transferable, but I'll give two examples. One is my first alternative career trajectory, working at a foundation, giving grants to nonprofits, right? How does legal skills inform that? Well, If you want to give a grant, which allows a nonprofit to fund itself, right? Because most nonprofits don't charge clients for fees, right? You get that from a grant from a nonprofit. If you want to give a grant to an immigration organization to change asylum law, you need lawyers who understand how asylum law works, who understand what direct services look like, to be a good grant maker, to know how much funds does it take to do X amount of work? What is the infrastructure that's needed? And so I use my legal skills there. As a pro bono director at the Lawyers Committee, I could not do my work if I had not litigated, done class action lawsuits, been on the field, and done policy work the way that I have. I just wouldn't even know what pro bono support is needed to advance the mission and the cases. So I think what's great about the law degree, again, is how flexible it is and how you can take it in so many different directions.
Great. Kyong, so I want to ask you, having started your business recently, did you know of attorneys who had made that transition to entrepreneurship? And I guess where did you look for guidance on making that transition? And kind of what has been kind of the timeline in terms of taking this from idea into product?
Well, that's a very loaded question, Sean. Let me try to answer in two ways. First, when I was thinking about leaving private practice, I mean, that's a huge decision that any lawyer who wants to leave full-time practice has to really, really think about and really evaluate whether or not that is something that they want to do. So I listened to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of books, really tried to dig deep inside of myself to figure out, is this what I want to do? And is it my time right now to leave private practice and pursue whatever it is? And I knew my sister wanted to launch Seasalt Kids in 2019. When I took my leave of absence in March of last year, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I knew I would, help Seasalt Kids, but I wasn't sure if I would, come on full time or not. But it was really during my leave of absence when I did a lot of soul searching that it's really solidified and gave me the conviction to actually walk away from, the golden handcuffs of what big law is, to take this huge risk with no safety net and join forces with my sisters to launch the company. To answer your second question, how long does it take? Well, I was fortunate enough to actually ride on the coattails of my older sister. I mean, she was the one who learned all of the manufacturing process of what it takes to actually make a swimsuit garment for kids. And that took her about a year or year and a half. And then once all of that was done, once she became an expert on fit, on construction, on materials, that's when I had decided, I will join forces on a full-time basis and help you take this to market. And that took about, I think in June of 2019, that's when I finally decided, I'm going to step away from law. And I'm going to dedicate myself to Seasalt Kids on a full-time basis. And so from June through December, it took us that amount of time to really get our infrastructure in place, to determine on a business level, who our target market is, do some of the market research, figure out the prototyping, get our production and our development of our actual product done, and then build the website. So we thought it was going to be in a matter of months. And so we always joke that our common saying last year was, oh, we're going to launch soon. We're going to launch soon. But it did take quite a while to launch. And finally, in December 2019, that's when we went live.
Professor Wang, since we have a lot of students in the audience this morning, I wanted to ask you, is there anything that has surprised you or that sticks out to you now as a professor about legal education, about legal training that you didn't know or didn't think about when you were a law student or when you were going through your formal education?
A couple of things. One of the things that was the most surprising to me is how much your law school professors want to interact with you, how much we want you to come to us, how much we would like to talk to you. We are so acutely aware of the fact that students are afraid to come in, to speak with us, to get to know us, because they are initially afraid that they're bothering us, or that their questions aren't valid, or perhaps that they don't have as much right to ask these questions or to take up their professor's time. And one of the things that I would say to you as high school students, college students, is come to your professors and talk with us. Every single one of us is an expert in our field, and we have experience to share with you. We have our networks to share with you. And we want to share those things with you. So when I was on the other side and realized how much the professors at our institution and at other institutions really care about the students' development, your professional development, your academic development, use us when you're there. Talk to us. And you can even talk to professors before you have started law school. For instance, if you would like to speak with me, if you have any questions about the law school experience, or if I can help connect you to somebody who can answer your questions, I would be happy to do that. Other things, just briefly, that I've learned is that everybody who goes to law school is going to develop the skills that they need to be an attorney. That's what law school is good at doing, and that's what you are going to leave at the end of your 3 years knowing how to do. But that there is a range of skills that will make you successful as an attorney that you may not learn just from focusing on the academics. And so that if you have the opportunity to engage in experiential education, if you have opportunity to network and get mentors during law school, that is something that I highly recommend. I'm sorry if I went slightly off topic there.
So I want to ask Kyong and Elica, following up on Professor Wang's comments. Can you just kind of tell our audience about what your law school experience was like, since this is our audience is mainly people who are looking to attend law school, considering law school. What was your experience like, if you can look back and kind of summarize those 3 years for us?
Sure. So I went to UC Davis School of Law, and I chose Davis because it had a very strong commitment to public interest and civil rights, which I knew was my career trajectory. I actually had a fantastic 3 years at Davis. I could not imagine a better environment to be in. I pretty much spent the majority of my time in law school doing work experience. I did the immigration law clinic for I think 20 hours a week. I externed at the ACLU. I did as many internships and externships as possible. So I had a pretty heavy work component to my law school experience. But I also spent a lot of time building relationships and friendships. That is really important. It's so important to have a good network and an authentic, network and relationships with folks in law. It was also incredibly tough. I mean, the hours you put in, and especially if you are the first in your family either to go to college or go to law school. And in a lot of ways, our legal system and our training is not necessarily set up for minorities, people of color, particularly to succeed. And so taking advantage of extra courses, mentorships, those types of things was incredibly important because it's tough and it's very draining, but also incredibly rewarding, at least for me.
And I have to piggyback on what Elica says. It is definitely rewarding. I think a lot of my closest friends right now were my law school friends. But that's not to say that law school is extremely difficult. I mean, I got my first PC ever in my life, my first year of law school. And I literally scratched the computer screen thinking that it was dirt on my computer and it was wrong. So, but it is extremely difficult and everybody knows that, and you will go through ups and downs and hardships. But building that network of supporters, building your community of friends will help you get through it. That being said, I did really enjoy law school. I don't look back on it and think that it was such a horrible experience. I don't want to mislead anybody. The first year of law school, which is a very important year for a variety of reasons, is very, very difficult. It's competitive oftentimes. You're often stressed. It's a different way of learning, and it is very, very intense. But with that said, as you progress over the years, you kind of get comfortable in that type of routine, that intensity, and then just building your network of friends and having those friendships carry on has been very, very rewarding and invaluable. So I look back on my law school experience. I went to UC Hastings, which I think it has a reputation of being competitive, and I didn't really get that sense. It was very difficult because you're with a group of very smart people, but it is a rewarding experience, definitely.
Elica, one of the things that you mentioned was networking, which is something that I think probably you don't think or hear much about prior to law school, but that in law school and as an attorney is something that's can be very important. Yeah. And I know you have been very involved with bar associations, and Kyong also as the former president of the Korean American Bar Association of California. And so I wanted to ask you folks, how is that volunteering or working with nonprofits or bar associations, helped your career, both when you're practicing attorney and now in what you do today?
I would say generally, I cannot overstate or overvalue how important it is to have a good network and good relationships, again, in an authentic way. No matter where I've been in my career, having peers and mentors, either on so many different levels, both for your substantive cases, right? The amount of times I've reached out to other law firms or friends in different sectors and said, have you seen this case? Have you seen this issue? Do you have a translator, who can support with this case? Do you have resources? Can you answer this one obscure question that has come up? That has been huge. And I would also say, just for you personally, right? Having friends and mentors say, I think this would be a great leadership opportunity for you. I saw this job and I thought of you, right? Or those pieces have helped me secure jobs, have helped me win cases. And I can't overstate it. And I'll also say, even when all the Muslim ban work was happening and we saw the protests across the country, we formed an airport lawyers group, that where we could share what was happening in different airports across the country, and I give that as a final kind of out there example. But even that network was so key in the advocacy that we did and providing, support to one another. So it's critical.
Yeah, and I echo those comments 100%. I wish I had networked or been a part of these minority bar organizations earlier on in my career. I got involved a little later, and through my involvement, I think it just helps you on a personal level to cope with the stresses of the legal profession, to meet like-minded people who actually have the same values that you do, maybe not necessarily in the legal context, but in the social context, and building that community. And having that outside of your practice or your law firm or outside of your office and job, or if you're in-house at a company, it's such a relief, right? Because you know that there is this group of people who will always support you and help you. Finding a mentor and a sponsor, as Allison had mentioned, is so invaluable, and do that early on in your career. Start as a law student and build those friendships. Don't network for it to be like this fake, I'm going to get something out of it. As Elica had mentioned, it has to be authentic. You want to do it. You need to have a very close relationship with that person. On a professional level, it does open a lot of doors. It gives you a lot more options than you otherwise would have had. Elica had mentioned jobs. You could find a lot of jobs that you might not have known of, or you thought you weren't necessarily going the right fit, or not necessarily as experienced. But there might be somebody at that bar organization that you're a part of who has some clout and will back you up, and you'll get your foot through the door. And I think those professional connections are also invaluable. So I would really, really encourage anyone who is going to law school, or even in the college setting, make those connections with your alumni. Start building those relationships and foster them and nurture them as you progress in your career.
I would be remiss if I didn't add that I think this can still be done during the pandemic, right? Email, ask for a phone conversation, ask for a virtual coffee, right? Just because we're all sheltering in place doesn't mean that we can't continue to build relationships and build out your networks.
That's a great point.
And I just want to piggyback off of what Elica said is we, and Allison had mentioned this too, I mean, us senior attorneys want to actually help those that are coming up, going into law school or thinking about law school, or even young attorneys, junior attorneys. Like, we actually want to pay it forward. But oftentimes, if we're not being emailed or requested or contacted, we don't know who needs that type of mentorship. So don't be afraid to reach out to us and be like, hey, can we have like a virtual coffee? Can I pick your brain about this? Because we all are here. People have helped us in our career, and we pay it forward by helping those coming up now as young attorneys. So don't be afraid to reach out at any time.
And one thing I just want to add very quickly is that some people hear the word networking and it strikes fear into their hearts. Some people are introverts. And so anybody who is listening to this and is hearing, I should network, but not me. That's not what I do. I encourage you to read some articles about networking for introverts, and I encourage you to take little steps that are within your comfort level, but to never stop networking, even if it's something small. If an email is easier, if talking to an employer is easier, sometimes you can get somebody on your side who can help you start with those networking skills. But don't just dismiss it because you feel uncomfortable putting yourself out there. Do a little bit of something, and the more you do it, the easier it becomes, because one of the top things that will assist you in your career, even if you don't go into law, is networking.
And some of you have mentioned, that it can be difficult. It can be intimidating to reach out, especially to senior level attorneys, professors, business people. Do you have any tips about the right way or the wrong way to make that reach out, a cold contact?
I would suggest, when you're reaching, first of all, add everyone on LinkedIn. Everyone here should be adding the speakers on the panel on their LinkedIn after this session, right? But whether you're sending a LinkedIn message or sending an email, just to make sure that you're being very professional, right? That you're reading through the email. And just know that if someone doesn't respond, they may just be like really jammed with a case. Don't take it personally. Don't be dissuaded from reaching out again to that same person or reaching out to other people. I think that's incredibly important to remember, that it's always worth trying and following up. Ask a question. Say I appreciated what you said about this. I would love to talk to you about something else, right? But to the extent that you can, say what you would like to talk about, what you would like advice on, what your interests are. Being specific then helps us, circle back to pay it forward or connect you with someone else in our network that may be able to be a better fit for providing professional advice and support.
A clear and specific ask is really one of the most important things that you can do, so that the person that you're trying to connect with, like I said, they understand what it is that you need, and they can decide whether they can help you or whether they can help connect you to somebody who can.
We're getting some great questions in the chat from the audience, and so I want to address those. Please keep sending them in. If you have any questions, please send them in the chat. One question that we have is directed to Kyong, asking, Kyong, you mentioned burnout, and I guess this is actually a question for all of you on the panel. The question is, how common is burnout in the legal profession? Does this occur more in some forms of law than in others? And how can we avoid this? A question that I don't think we're going to be able to answer or solve in the time that we have, but wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I'll try to be succinct and with some brevity here. That's a very, very good question. I think associates in the private practice, and I still think this is true today, they were ranked as the most dissatisfied people in the legal profession. And a lot of that had to do with burnout. Burnout is real, and when you experience it, it is probably one of the most disheartening things ever. I think in the private practice, especially for big law, it's a lot more common because of the cases that you work on, the expectations that you have. A lot of that is kind of tied to what I mentioned before, the golden handcuffs of making this very hefty salary. And so people who do enter big law, and when I say big law, I mean, the reputable elite law firms, have an expectation to really work long hours. You're always at the beck and call of a partner or of a client. But with that said, I do have to say that the legal industry is changing. I think more firms are becoming aware of this burnout and how to implement self-care programs to help associates cope with the demands of private practice. So I do see a shift. I think that firms are a little more cognizant of the burnout and they're trying to prevent it. But in my opinion, I do think that it occurs more in the private practice, particularly at big firms. And I think your second question, Erin, is how to avoid that burnout. Make sure you're your own advocate. And I can't emphasize this enough. There will be people who are looking out for your best interest, but you yourself will dictate your own path and what path you're going to take in your legal profession. So make sure, if work-life balance is important to you, make sure you set that tone right when you start. Don't be answering emails right away on the weekend. Make it clear to your partners and set that tone and make sure you do implement that. That I was actually really bad at balancing. So I don't know if anybody else on this panel could give more insight into that, but I do wish that as an advocate for myself, I would have really taken the time to not worked so many weekends just to get my billable hours or just to be the star associate. So make it a priority and really be disciplined in making sure that you find time for yourself and make that balance happen.
I would also say, in the nonprofit civil rights space, in addition to just the pressure and demands of law, you're often working with clients and cases and communities where there's a significant trauma. And so the level of burnout in the public interest space is huge. You're often also at a disadvantage with organizational resources. You might not have as many resources to work with at a big law firm. So I would say that's an issue across the field, no matter what direction you go in. I do think that, to me, your self-care and building the skills to address burnout is a skill to start practicing in law school and is equally important as your ability to do legal research and writing. What you want to do your best is to put yourself in the best position to be successful in your career. And that means making it sustainable for yourself. And you can practice that in law school with how you exercise, how you respond, right? There's all these things that you can do beforehand to really prep yourself well for that.
And one thing I would add to that is if you are in law school, utilize the law school's wellness services. They are there to teach you those skills and to help you. And when you're in practice, look into different types of mindfulness. Mindful practice is a movement now. There are lots of resources for you to check out to help you start taking care and finding ways to avoid burnout.
Those are great points. And in addition to the emotional, physical, mental toll that practicing law can have, that we have to make sure that we address. We also have questions from the audience about the financial pressures post law school. So we have a question from the audience about what advice you have for people who are worried about paying off law school loans, but are interested in being an attorney outside of traditional legal careers.
I can speak to that generally. There are many law schools that offer scholarships and offer different types of programs for students who are working in nonprofit fields or are working in different areas. Some of the law schools that maybe don't have the biggest names may actually have the best aid packages when it comes to looking for financing your tuition. Sometimes you are able to actually not need to take out loans depending on which schools you look at. So one of the things that I would tell students to do first is to be a really informed consumer and look around at all of the law schools in the areas where you're interested in attending and see what's available. And then secondly, probably Elica could speak to this as well, is what type of post-law school relief you can get if you work in public interest, if that is one of the non-traditional areas that you want to work in.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So there's a program called Public Service Loan Forgiveness. And what that means is if you are dedicated to doing public service for 10 years, your loans, basically you pay off a percentage of your loan that's proportionate to your income. And whatever you don't pay off within that 10 years, as long as you meet the qualifications, the program states that the rest of your loans are forgiven. So it makes the payoff financially doable because there is a significant difference between a public interest salary and a private interest salary. There's also a lot of flexibility with that, right? So when I worked at the foundation or in my current job, just because I don't have my cases, I still qualified in all of those positions for public service loan forgiveness. I will note, though, that it's important to make sure you fit all of the requirements, and it's important to follow some of the laws and legislations around public service loan forgiveness and make sure you completely understand it so that you're not put in a position where down the road, halfway through your 10 years, you realize you didn't take out the right loan or you didn't qualify or those pieces, because that can be a big setback and unfortunately something that we're seeing. But definitely public service loan forgiveness is worth exploring.
And I'll just add to that really quickly. I went to law school and I paid my way through with a hefty amount of loans, which I won't even get into. But I went into it knowing that law school is a financial investment. But instead of seeing law school as this, $100,000 or maybe even more financial investment, think of it as that you're investing in yourself, you're investing in your future, and that all of the returns on this investment, they will happen. It will take a long period of time to pay off your loans, especially if you're going into a non-traditional legal career that might not pay the salaries that private lawyers make. But there are ways to pay it off, and there are certain strategies that you can take. One tangible and actionable advice I would say is, if you know you want to go to law school and you already know it's going to be a financial commitment and you have to pay your way through, to meet with a financial advisor and see what the best options are and what options you could take as a law student to lessen the amount of loans that you have upon graduation.
We're coming towards the end of our time here, but we are getting questions in the chat about how to set how students can set themselves up to get into law school, to succeed in law school, and to get their first legal positions. And so maybe as we start wrapping up, can you address for maybe a student in high school, how can they start to set themselves up in the best way possible to find their paths?
I'll speak to that really quickly. So I'm a firm believer of that there are two numbers that are most important in your life: your GPA and your credit score. So get good grades, because that will carry you and that will ensure that you get into a good law school. Maybe not ensure, I mean, that might be an overreach, but that will at least be something that you could use to get into a good law school. And when I say credit score, I say that before I used to say, okay, you need a great credit score to buy a house and to be financially secure when you get older. But as a business owner, I now realize that when you start your own business, and we're self-funded, we don't have any seed capital, but it has helped me immensely in terms of, the credit lines, the type of services that you get at a bank. And so keep that in mind as you move on in your life, that get a good GPA, study hard, and just develop that really diligent work ethic, because that will carry you through.
I echo, for me, I did horribly on the LSAT. I mean, really horribly. And so having a strong GPA was just really key throughout my career trajectory. And I would also say any work experience, any leadership experience, even if it's not directly related to law, is incredibly invaluable. You can be an attorney on any area of issue, right? You could be an entertainment lawyer, you could be a civil rights lawyer, you could be an employment lawyer and represent different businesses, right? So no matter where you work, no matter how you build your leadership, if you get involved in youth programs with city council, whatever it is, just build out your experience and build out your leadership. Be authentic about who you are, what your interests are, and that will all inevitably help you build out your interest and get into law school.
I agree with all of that. Some of the numbers are the numbers, your GPA, your LSAT score, those are the things that you come in with, but what sets you apart is what you've done and what your experience shows about your leadership skills, your analytical skills, your work ethic, your diligence, your interest in the law. So those are the things that you should focus on.
All right, so we're coming to the end of our time today. I want to say thank you to our panelists for sharing more about their career paths. It was a really insightful conversation. I hope that all of our attendees enjoyed it. If we didn't get to your question today, you can email us at aba.bayarea@gmail.com, and I understand that we will be able to pass along questions to the panelists as well if you email it at that address. Thank you very much again, and enjoy your weekend. And with that, I'd like to hand it back over to Pamela.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to our panel for your wonderful advice and insight. And to everyone, we hope you enjoyed today's session. Please join us next Saturday at 10 a.m. for our fourth and final session, the Law Students Panel, which will feature moderator Stephen Chong, Principal Attorney of the Law Office of Stephen Chong, and law students Bonifacio Seasalt from UC Berkeley School of Law, Evelyn Boy from UC Hastings College of the Law, and Christy Uyen Lee from Texas A&M University School of Law. If you registered for today's session on AABA's website, you will receive an email with the YouTube link to next Saturday's session. If you haven't registered yet, you can do so at our website, aaba-bay.com/pathways. And we hope you'll join us for next week's panel, and thank you for tuning in.